this is some really interesting stuff around the GOP actual other candidates than DeSantis. So let's go ahead and put this up there on the screen. What do we know? First, let's start with the cash on hand figure as of June 30th that they had to file. Donald Trump has got $22.5 million cash on hand. Tim Scott, shocking, I guess, everybody else, has got $21.1 million. It's nice to be the big dollar donors' favorite candidate.
Yeah, and some of that he moved over from his Senate campaign, just so people know.
And Joe Biden's got $20 million, $20.1 million cash on hand. Ron DeSantis, $12.2 million. Vivek Ramaswamy, $9 million. Noteworthy, though, that in the Ramaswamy camp, he actually personally loaned some money over to his campaign. His actual individual dollar figures, probably more like $2 million. Now, in terms of the actual money raised, keep in mind that this money raised does include loans in some cases from the candidates. Ron DeSantis, $20.1 million. Biden, $19.9 million. Trump, $17.7 million. Burgum, $11.8 million. Ramaswamy, $7.7. As we said, though, both Burgum and Ramaswamy had personal actual contributions to their own campaigns. So $7.7 million in the case of Vivek Ramaswamy, who's a very wealthy individual, and then Doug Burgum as well loaned himself $10 million. So the real figure is quite a little bit less. But what can we learn, I think, from these? Number one is we'll do an entire thing on Biden here in a second, but it's not exactly like things are going well. But two, also comes not only from the not only comes really from the actual overall figure and the cash on hand. As you saw with DeSantis, he raised quite a bit of money. But as we previously just said, he tapped out the big donors, and his cash on hand is very low because he didn't have the overall coffers to be able to come in. So that's why his burn rate, whenever it remains so high, he's got to offload that as much as possible. Tim Scott, of course, had large amounts of money that he was able to roll over from a Senate campaign, some of these legally allowable under FEC law, but the overall actual individual donations, that came in for him, not exactly even close to the same. Nikki Haley already, we did an entire segment in the past about how she effectively duped a lot of campaign reporters by trying to report far more that she'd actually raised than was real. And I think that it's pretty obvious here. We've got effectively a three-candidate race at the very, very top of the spectrum. Joe Biden, obviously, the sitting president. Then you've got, on the other hand, you've got Trump and you've got DeSantis. But DeSantis is so far behind. While he is, technically, I guess, in the big leagues, he's still running very, very far behind both of those two majors.
Another noteworthy number from the campaign finance reports is a really low figure from Vice President Mike Pence.
Oh, yes.
Former Vice President Mike Pence, who only raised $1.2 million. And think about it. This man was literally Vice President of the United States. He's been in politics for a long time. He has a lot of contacts. He is well networked. He has been, working the donor lines for years and years now. So for him to only raise $1.2 million, that is a really, really sad showing for the former vice president. I think that one was really noteworthy. And the other piece to watch with this is we are coming up, it's only about a month till the first Republican primary debate, which will be fun. I'm excited about that. I'm sure we're going to do big coverage here. We're just starting to work on our plans for that. But you have to get 40,000 people to donate to your campaign in order to make the stage. The polling threshold is actually quite low. It's like 1% in 3 major polls, something like that. So almost all these candidates will be able to achieve the polling metric. So it's that donor metric that is going to be really tough. And we already see some very innovative techniques being employed in order to try to achieve that result. So Doug Burgum, who again, wealthy tech executive, he is promising donors he will give them a $20 gift card if they contribute just $1 to his campaign. So there's some sketchiness around exactly the legality of that, but that's the direction that he is going in. Vivek has also has a sort of creative approach here. He has people signing up to fundraise for him, and then they get a 10% kickback on any funds that they raise for his campaign. So you already see that the race is on to try to, game those numbers and be able to meet that donor threshold. Of course, former President Trump basically saying he's not really planning on engaging in the debates.
Yeah, he didn't say it effectively, but, he did give an interview to Fox News that aired yesterday where he was like, well, Ronald Reagan didn't do any debates, which, is not true. But, he did in 1980 in terms of the debates and the primary challengers and all of that. But I consistently think, I mean, look, we have no idea what he's going to do. He may actually do it, and he likes to keep everybody in suspense. He may just show up, at the very, very last minute and decide. But because Christie is trying very, very hard to make the debate, Trump is really somebody of superstition. He understands what Christie did to the Rubio campaign back in 2016. He's leading so far ahead. I think to him, he's like, why would I put myself in that position? Let everybody else squabble for my scraps while I remain on top. For DeSantis, I really don't know. I mean, honestly, because he will be the number one on the stage, should he actually choose to participate with everybody else, well, I think it's going to be an issue because everybody's going to be gunning for him. You're going to see Ramaswamy going after him. You're going to be seeing Tim Scott, Nikki Haley. All of them have chosen to fire against him rather than against Donald Trump because he's so popular.
Yeah.
The other governors on the stage, guys like Burgum and all of them, look, they may be irrelevant whenever it comes to polling, but they have an ego thing going on. Be like, wait, I'm a governor too. Why am I not getting the same respect as Ron DeSantis? So they will also choose to go after him. So I think overall, it's going to be a tenuous situation for DeSantis. I don't think he really can afford to step out. And if he can hold his own, I think that'll be great.
Yeah.
And then for Trump himself, well, I do think it'll be tough. I think it would be tough for him to go on the stage and subject himself to attacks ego-wise, because I just don't see himself doing that. So for him, he's almost certainly going to sit out, although we don't know.
You never,
possible.
I mean, you never know with that dude. I sort of agree with the logic of you're ahead, you don't need to risk it. Whereas DeSantis needs to risk it. And, to play devil's advocate here, perhaps it's elevating for him to be the center of attention and be the focus of all the attacks. And if he's able to handle that really well, maybe he actually does himself some good by subjecting himself to the rigors of the debate. And, we've seen many times before, these candidates, when they get into a debate situation, it makes them better candidates. I think the people, like Biden and Trump, who were thinking of just staying in the basement and not really going out and campaigning that much, you get rusty, right? You got to get out there and do your reps and get practice. So listen, I personally think everybody should be required to debate. I think it should be a baseline standard for democracy, but that's not the world we live in. So Trump is probably going to sit it out. We'll see. For DeSantis, listen, maybe he could do himself some good there on the stage. Do you think, Saagar, it all feels so inevitable? Like, it feels so much like, all right, we're heading for the Biden-Trump rematch, and it's hard to imagine what's going to push that off course. Doesn't it just seem like there must be some curveball that's going to come at us that's going to shake things up because it always does? Yeah,
I hope so. I think, listen, we cover the news. I would like for it to be interesting. Biden and Trump is the least interesting thing I think that could possibly happen.
I
don't know
exactly what we're going to.
Here's the problem with curveball. Who knows? I don't know what it's going to look like. It could be terrible. So
maybe
it's not one of those
right.
fun things that that could necessarily happen. But I do agree that the things do seem so predictable. It does feel like the writers need to throw something in to get things interesting. The big problem I think for the debates is if Trump's not there, who cares? I mean, I'm sure you remember this. The 2015 GOP debates, those weren't political events.
God.
That was a cultural event in America.
Yes.
Millions. People should go back and look at the ratings versus almost all previous ones. The very first debate, and Trump didn't, he delivered. If we're thinking in terms of YouTube metrics, he certainly grabbed people's attention and kept retention throughout, because what's the very first thing he said? He said, I've only called, what did he say? I've only Rosie O'Donnell in terms of calling women pigs or fat or something like that.
Yes.
And then, refuses to raise his hand, saying that he won't commit to supporting the GOP nominee. I mean, he got people glued to that screen. He turned it into a genuine media event. Rand Paul, he's like, why is Rand Paul even on this stage? That was just debate number one. And there were these events over and over and over again, which were very beneficial, I think, to him in the long run, and turned it into a circus, which overall helped his poll numbers. Without that Trump factor, I do think it will be difficult to actually get people to even watch this thing.
I'm gonna throw a hot take out there, which is I don't think Christie is going to be the GOP nominee, but I think he's going to be more consequential than we are expecting, just because there is something compelling about the dude is out there. First of all, I've always thought he's a genuine political talent. I think of everybody outside of Trump, I think he's the most politically talented of the candidates in the Republican field. And there is something compelling about someone who's just willing to go out and say it and not like pull punches and not do all this weird, awkward, like, well, I love Donald Trump, but I just think we should move on for reasons that I'm unwilling to state. The fact that he just goes out there, he takes, he throws his punches, he says what it feels like he really thinks. I do think that he will consolidate the actual like anti-Trump part of the GOP base. Now that's not a huge percentage, but in certain states it could be a significant percentage of the Republican electorate. I just saw a New Hampshire poll that had Christie moving into third, and he's in double digits, and he's leapfrogged over a number of other candidates who are ahead of him in terms of fundraising and media attention, et cetera. And I certainly think in terms of the debates, like if I was Ron DeSantis preparing for these debates, the person I would definitely be most wary of would be Christie, because we know what kind of damage he can do when he goes on a tear. So he would be the person that I would be most aggressively preparing for and figuring out how I could parry whatever attacks he might throw at you.
I think you're right. I also think Ramaswamy is I think he's a dark horse candidate.
Yeah, that's true. He's comfortable on his feet.
He's very comfortable on his feet. Because he has a legal background, he is very good at almost legalistically working through different things. And I've watched him do it a couple of in CNN panels, like arguing over charges against Trump, of course, in that famous debate, I guess, against Don Lemon. But I think that his ability to try and throw something out of left field, like some sort of pledge that sounds interesting, but is one that the Ron DeSantis campaign won't want to back themselves into a corner or something like that, I really could see it. He does it sometimes on Twitter, where he'll issue like, pledges and things that candidates should take, which, many candidates don't do because they don't want to put themselves, on his ground. So I could very much see him kind of boxing Ron DeSantis, possibly rhetorically at the very least.
I mean, I saw someone on Twitter, I'll just steal their take, that it tells you everything about the Republican primary, that the candidate in the Republican primary who has the most online energy is Vivek Ramaswamy, whose whole thing is basically being like, Trump was great. So it tells you where the bulk of the Republican base actually is. And, he does have a lot, especially of online energy behind him. I was frankly surprised he didn't have higher grassroots fundraising numbers. I thought he would have a pretty good grassroots fundraising haul, but the overwhelming majority of his contributions actually came directly from his own bank account. So
I agree. Yeah, I mean, listen, the problem with Twitter is that it is a self-contained universe. It's one of those things which is real until it's really not real. And I think that every time that it's not real is whenever we extend into actual electoral politics. There are so many millions of people who engage with the political system in a way that is very difficult for all of us who kind of live in this world to conceive. I mean, I've said this before, I know I shocked some of our viewers, but if you watch our show every day, you are absolutely at least in the top 1 or 2% of political consumption in the entire US, a huge outlier compared to the general population. And if you watch the news or even really check in with the news on a day-to-day basis, you remain probably in the top like 5 to 10%. The average person in this country does not think about politics really at all. They barely knew who the president is. Every once in a while, it infiltrates an Instagram feed or comes in by a culture, but it is one of those which remains very, very distant and off. So you always have to think about that person, not about the people sitting at this desk or the people who are watching this show.
And what percentage of even the online support for Vivek are people who are like, but I'm voting for Donald Trump. Like, I like you because you like Donald Trump, and I also like Donald Trump, but I'm voting for Donald Trump. I mean, based on the polling, it seems like there's a good chunk that are in that category.
Absolutely correct.
Hey guys, if you like that video, go to breakingpoints.com, become a premium subscriber, and help us build the best independent media organization on the planet.
That's right. We're subscriber funded. We're building something new. We want to replace these failing mainstream media organizations.
So again, to subscribe, it's breakingpoints.com.